Welcome to Light O'Clock. Today, we're zooming in on a growing global issue, myopia or nearsightedness.
So this one?
E.
What about in this row?
F and P. H. O. Z.
Yeah, most of us have probably taken that test before. Myopia now affects nearly 1 in 3 people around the world. And what's even more concerning is just how common it's becoming in children. So in today's episode, we're talking about time outdoors, light exposure, and how these factors might actually be shaping our kids' vision. And so to get a little perspective on how children today feel about their eyesight and about spending time outside, my colleague Rashaya chatted with 2 very adorable kids for me.
So we're just going to do an eye test.
Okay.
And basically, I just want to see how good your eyesight is. And how do you feel that your eyesight is?
I feel it's amazing.
You feel like you have an amazing eyesight?
Yes.
Can you say that again?
I have an amazing eyesight.
Amazing.
She also asked them about their favorite things to do outdoors and whether they think that going outside is important.
So my first question is, do you like spending time outside?
Yes.
Okay. And what's your favorite thing to do when you're outside?
I like to play soccer, basketball, or play badminton.
Do you think that it's important to spend time outside?
Of course, because if we don't spend time outside, we lack the amount of vitamin D in our body.
The thing is, many kids today just don't spend much time outside. It could be because of heavy home workloads, weather that's not exactly outdoor friendly, or just the temptation of screens and tablets indoors. But here's the catch. This shift towards indoor life might actually be affecting their eyesight in measurable ways. And so to dive into the science behind this, I spoke to Professor Raymond Najjar from the National University of Singapore, who's been studying how light exposure affects myopia and how different light therapy strategies can be implemented for myopia prevention in kids. Ray, welcome to Light O'Clock. Before we dive into the science, can you tell us a little bit about where you're based and what you research?
Thank you for having me. I'm Raymond Najjar. I'm assistant professor in the National University of Singapore and the Department of Ophthalmology and the Department of Biomedical Engineering. I'm also the head of the Visual Neuroscience Department at the Singapore Eye Research Institute and the head of the Eye and Brain Research Group. And our research focuses on how light affects health in general, but more recently, more specifically, we're interested in how light can affect eye growth and can help us control the epidemic of myopia around the world.
Yeah, great. And today with you, we really want to zoom in this topic of myopia and how it's related to light exposure. And so let's just start simple. What is myopia actually?
So myopia is a type of refractive error. We also call it short-sightedness. Some people recognize it as short-sighted instead of myopic. And what it is, it's just a blurring of objects when we see them at a distance. So most commonly, it is due to a mismatch between how fast the eye is growing and how well the focal components of the eye, which we know like the cornea, the lens, are capable to focus the light on the retina. So in a way, if you want to think about it simply, most commonly myopia, short-sightedness is due to a fast elongation of the eye, fast growth of the eye, so that the image of objects that are far away are not seen clearly anymore. They're seen blurred.
Right. So the eye grows a little bit too long, and then we have trouble focusing distant objects.
That's exactly it.
Right. At what age does myopia typically start?
So this is a very good question. And honestly, it's starting to depend on which country we're talking about. So, for example, in Singapore or in countries In Asia, Japan, South Korea, we are starting to see myopia onset around the age of 5 and 6, which is very early. Usually myopia starts around the age of 10, but in countries like Singapore, we're starting to see myopia onset around in a very early age.
Right. And how common is myopia then across the world?
So the prevalence of myopia around the world is on average between 22 and 30%. However, in countries like Singapore, for example, by primary 6, so by the age of 12, you have around 60 to 66% of kids who are already myopic. And the number in Singapore is there's 81% of young adults who are myopic in Singapore. So you can tell that the prevalence is quite different across different countries.
Yeah, that's really high, and it's quite crazy actually. So in terms of thinking about what causes then myopia, is it mostly genetics? So say that like one of my parents or both my parents have myopia, I'm also very likely to get it? Or does the environment also play a big role?
Yeah, so there's two components to myopia, two risk factors, let's say. So of course you have genetics. If both parents are myopic or even highly myopic, the child has a high risk of becoming myopic. There are GWAS studies pointing out specific genes responsible for myopia. However, genetics alone cannot explain that rapid trend and rapid increase in prevalence that we're seeing around the world. Then that hints us towards the environment also playing an important role in myopia development.
Right. And so when we think about environment, also because on the Light O'Clock podcast, of course, we're interested in light exposure. We can now talk a little bit about how light exposure actually might affect myopia development. What do we know so far about this?
So let's maybe talk about light exposure and light as part of the environment. At first, I want to clarify that the impact of the environment on myopia development is still unclear. We don't know specifically what parts of the environment are causing an eye to become myopic. Light is one part of it, and I will talk more in details about light. But let me get two things out of the way first. What we know about the environment comes predominantly from experiences and studies in kids who go outdoors, right? So kids who go outdoors enough, who have high amounts of time spent outdoors, seem to be protected against myopia. Now, a lot of researchers have spent a lot of time exploring what is protective about time outdoors. There are multiple things that you notice when you go from indoors to outdoors. First thing is you notice a change in the scenery, right? You notice a change in what we call the spatial frequency of what we're seeing. Like you see a diversity of colors, of different higher spatial frequency objects. That's one thing. The second thing is the kids are no longer doing near work, so their eyes are more relaxed. When they go outdoors, they can see things far away. And we know that near work contributes to myopia development. And of course, the third thing that you notice when you step outdoors is light and a change in light intensity. Light outdoors is much brighter than light indoors, obviously, 10 to 1,000 times brighter than what we have indoors. And we believe that light intensity, but also light spectrum meaning the color content of light, which is totally different outdoors, is broader, is fuller, play an important role in myopia and in myopia protection as one of the features of outdoors.
So when you say myopia protection, is it that kids who spend more time outdoors either develop myopia later on or they just don't develop it at all?
That's a very good question. So what we know is that kids who spend more time outdoors have a reduced incidence rate of myopia, meaning that they have a reduced risk of myopia onset over 2 years, for example. Now, whether they will develop myopia eventually, there are still studies that need to be done around that topic. But what we know is that we can reduce the risk of developing, of launching or starting myopia in these kids.
Okay. So just to summarize what you explained about the outdoor that we think helps in protecting against myopia development. So it's the kind of the type of the environment. So objects are more distant, there's more color, the spatial frequency. So this aspect about angles and corners is very different outdoor than indoor. And then also where we focus. You said indoor kids tend to do more near work. And by that, I'm guessing you mean like they look at a book or a tablet these days. Whereas outdoors, they're likely looking like very far away. And then, of course, the light. So you said both the level of the light, so how bright the light is. Outdoors is much brighter than indoors. And the spectrum, so like the color content of daylight is not like what we get with a lamp, right?
That's exactly it. And I want to iterate on one point as well. And it comes from a study done by Rose and colleagues, where they showed that even kids who spend a lot of time indoor doing near work, near work today, as you mentioned, is most commonly tablets. But when I say near work, can also be a book, reading a book. That's near work. Even if they spend a lot of time doing near work, if they go outdoors enough, and by enough, we mean today 2 to 3 hours per day, they're still protected against myopia. So going outdoors can actually compensate and still protect against myopia, even if the child is doing a high amount of near work.
Right. Okay. And how is like this going outdoors integrated nowadays with kids? So, for example, I remember when I was a child, there were like moments in the day where in school, we would have to go out and play. And I mean, we would do this like super happily. And it sounds like almost an easy solution, right? So we know that time outdoors is very good to prevent myopia development. So it kind of sounds like an easy solution. Is it actually much harder in practice nowadays to get kids outside?
So it is definitely harder to get kids outside. And again, this will depend on the countries, right? So, and it will depend on many factors related to outdoors, like the climate, like the educational pressure. But if we want to summarize it, it is much harder to take the kids outdoors today with all the attractions we have indoors than, let's say, 20 years ago. Add to this, a lot of countries around the world have high educational pressure. So the kids go from school to other enrichment classes and they spend most of their time indoors. And add to this, parents are busy. They can't commit to taking the kids outdoors for 2 to 3 hours a day. So remember, this is 2 to 3 hours a day. We're not talking 30 minutes. We're talking 2 to 3 hours a day. It's considerable time outdoors. So to answer shortly, yes, it is not as easy as it sounds. However, it is feasible. And multiple studies from China, actually, and Taiwan, and multiple programs in China have shown that it is feasible to increase outdoor time in kids. Now, whether this is through parents or through schools, it's still effective. Let me give you an example of a school study where they just increased a recess time, right? So they increase the duration of recess, or they added one more recess time, and they actually managed to reduce the numbers or the percentage of new onset myopia. So that's a school-based intervention aimed at increasing time outdoors, which actually was effective. And so if it's not through parents, it could be through schools, it could be through other means.
Right. That's really cool that they were able to do this in school. And I just want to loop back to something that you also mentioned at the beginning. So you said there's different prevalence of myopia depending on which country we're looking at in the world. And now you told us that, kids spend more time indoors because of educational pressure, for example. So is it also that in certain parts of the world, kids are more prompted to spend time indoors because there's just higher educational pressure, and then also maybe because the climate just doesn't allow to go out as much as in other parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case that's happening at the moment. Educational pressure plays an important role in the amount of time kids spend outdoors. There's the climate as well. Singapore, for example, is hot and humid. It's not always possible to go outdoors at all times of the day. And of course, the sun sets around 6:30, 7 p.m. So you're limited by the amount of sunlight you get every day if we're talking light exposure. Add to this, it's also more difficult now to attract the kids to go outdoors. There's so many reasons to stay indoors for the kids, to be online, to be connected, to be doing their homework, same, to be basically on a screen instead of going outdoors. So it becomes tricky. One thing that we also noticed is the availability of caregivers or caretakers, parents, or whomever's taking care of the child. Their availability matters a lot. We cannot send a child outdoors, specifically if we're talking about early onset. We're talking about kids around 6, 7 years old. They rarely go outdoors on their own. So it's important to make sure that there's someone taking the child out, and the availability of that person is also to be taken into account when we're considering programs to take the kids outdoors and increase time outdoors in children.
Yeah, makes sense. And so if getting kids to spend more time outdoors is actually a little bit trickier than it sounds, is there also a possibility of improving the indoor lighting? Like, are there ways that we can actually improve what kind of lights we receive when we're actually spending time indoors that could also help to prevent myopia?
This is a difficult question, okay? And the reason why this is a difficult question is because we are still lacking good trials looking at improving indoor lighting for myopia control. Here's what we know. We know that from a school study, again, increasing classroom light to around, if I'm not mistaken, 500 to 600 lux on average, and this is around the blackboard or around the desk, can be effective in reducing the onset of new myopia. And this is, again, a school-based trial. Now, would sitting next to a window be better than sitting in an enclosed environment? Unfortunately, we don't have the answer to that. Here's what we know from animal studies, though. Animal studies tell us that increasing light intensity can be protective against myopia. And this is in chickens, in tree shrews, in guinea pigs, and in non-human primates. So the evidence is quite strong there that for experimental models of myopia, increasing light intensities indoors, right? So we're not changing the spatial environment, indoors, can help prevent or at least slow the development of myopia. And this is apparently through different mechanisms that include increased dopamine secretion within the eye and other pathways that we can discuss maybe later. We also know from animal studies that improving the quality of the spectrum indoors, right, can help in slowing down the development of myopia. Particularly, we've done a study in chickens where we tested the effect of what we call sun-like LEDs. So these are LEDs that mimic the spectrum of sunlight. And we found that these LEDs can help the eye recover from myopia faster. So in a way can help the eye go back to normal faster than fluorescent light. We concluded, of course, this needs to be confirmed in human studies. We concluded that these type of LEDs that mimic the spectral composition, the color content, the broadness of spectrum of sunlight can help and promote ametropization or the normal development of the eye and the prevention of myopia.
Right. And so kind of, as you said, thinking about how this could be proven in humans, we would kind of need a study where these LEDs, the special LEDs that you mentioned that mimic the spectrum of daylight, so like outdoor light, would be on the ceiling of a classroom, for example, and then see if it's not just the intensity, but also the actual spectrum of light can actually do something to the kids in terms of prevention of myopia.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what we're working on at the moment. So we do have a clinical trial running. It's a school-based clinical trial The trial is called LightSPAN. It's in collaboration with ToonCreate, with Manuel Spichan, who you know very well. And so we are running this trial in classrooms where we optimize the spectral composition of classroom lights to mimic sunlight and see whether that makes a difference in how the eye grows and if we can prevent myopia in school-going children. So this is in children who are 6 to 9 years old, so primary 2 and 3. And we're halfway through it. So yeah, maybe we can tell you more about it in around 6 months' time. Yeah.
Really, really cool study. And so just to go a little bit more in detail in this study. So how was setting up this study? So you basically installed new lights in the classrooms. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we retrofitted the fittings that are existing in the classrooms with new light tubes that mimic the spectral composition of sunlight. And we're currently monitoring. We go to schools every 6 months. We take our equipment there and we basically do all the eye assessments necessary to monitor for myopia development, but also monitor the back of the eye, monitor the health aspects of the retina, look at the choroid, which is that vascular layer in the back of the eye that nourishes the outer retina, and then do multiple eye assessments in these kids, all at the schools. We don't ask the kids to come to our clinics. Our team goes to the schools and do all the checkups for the kids enrolled in LightSPAN there.
Wow, a really cool study. And because earlier you mentioned how the outdoor environment is so important also for myopia prevention, do you also measure how much time the kids spend outdoors or how much light they receive generally in their daily lives? So also like outside of school?
Yeah, we do. So given that this is a light-based intervention, at least, we do monitor objectively how much light the kids are exposed to. So we give the kids light sensors that they wear throughout the study. It's a 12-month study. And throughout these 12 months, we monitor how much time they're spending outdoors, what type of light, or what color of light, or what are the characteristics of the light that they're getting across the day. And we take this into account when we actually monitor any myopia development in these children.
Right. So basically, you will be able to see whether the light intervention indoor, so like the new lighting system that you installed, whether that helped, but also whether the amount of time or they spend outdoors or the amount of light they get in total, how those two things contribute to the myopia progression, prevention, development.
Yeah, definitely. So we try to control for these confounders. And in our case, at least in our group that is exposed to new classroom lighting, we need to control for time outdoors. So we use objective light trackers to be able to control for time outdoors in the different groups enrolled in LightSPAN. We also ask the parents how much time their child is spending outdoors. So we have subjective questionnaires. We take into account multiple other variables like, are the parents myopic? Does the child have any siblings that are myopic? And so forth. So this is a randomized controlled trial with 3 arms: control arm, a classroom intervention arm, and 1 arm where we have a behavioral intervention using these light trackers and an application.
Is this behavioral intervention something like they need to spend more time outdoors, like you prompt them to spend more time outdoors, or what do they have to do exactly?
So I will have to limit myself on what I can say about the behavioral intervention, because this is a double-masked trial. In a way, let's say we're not only trying to change the behavior of kids, but also change the behavior of parents. And I think the main purpose from this behavioral intervention is to, let's say, keep the parents informed about how much time their kids are spending outdoors on a daily basis. So allow them to track the time outdoors of their children, and in a way also allow them to take action if they want to take action about increasing the time outdoors for their child. So that's our behavioral intervention. And we do this through an application that we called LightUp. And we communicate with the parents as well through the LightUp application. And this LightUp application is connected to the light sensor that I mentioned to you earlier, that basically gives the parent an objective mean of tracking time outdoor for their child. As I mentioned to you earlier as well, we ask the parents to subjectively tell us how much time outdoors they think their child is spending. And usually this is often inaccurate. They tend to overestimate time outdoors. So with LightUp and with objective tracking of light exposure and outdoors time exposure, this allows parents to mitigate a little bit and realize how much time their child is spending outdoors in reality.
Right. This reminds me a little bit that sometimes parents have a certain time that their children spend playing on a tablet, and the tablet tells them, hey, your child has spent 30 minutes already on this. So with this app, you're kind of telling the parents, hey, your child has spent only this and this amount of time outdoor, for example.
Yeah, that is correct, is keeping them informed. And maybe, this is what it takes. It takes the parents to be informed of the risk, one, of their kids becoming myopic, which is quite high in Singapore. And at the same time, educating the parents that time outdoors is important. And three, giving them a means to really quantify how much time outdoors their child are getting every day. Yeah.
Right. So you said you're collecting the data now, and I guess I'm just curious to know, when are you going to be done collecting the data?
So we're in a halfway mark at the moment. We're still collecting data from the schools that are involved in LightSPAN, and we hopefully will be done within the next 6 months. And we'll be able to have a look at what we've collected and the efficacy of our intervention then.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that and to hear more about the results. I guess I just wanted to end with one question, because the audience of this podcast is, mostly not kids and people who already might have myopia and might wear glasses in their daily life. And I was just wondering, is there any study or evidence or investigation of whether, once you already have myopia, spending time outdoors actually helps with anything?
So spending time outdoors has been really found effective against myopia onset. So the beginning of myopia, that trigger of the person becoming myopic, right? There are less investigations looking into the progression of myopia and time spent outdoors. Most of the time, until today, we still think time outdoors, prevention. Most studies looking at progression of myopia found that time outdoors is not that important. It's not that effective in slowing the progression. However, we have to think about it in another way. How were we monitoring time outdoors? Predominantly through subjective questionnaires. Again, subjective questionnaires tend to overestimate time outdoors or sometimes underestimate. They're not that accurate. So today there's a need to revisit that question. Is spending time outdoors also important for the protection against myopia progression? I think that's a very important question that we need to address. There are some papers that came out showing that it could be effective in slowing the progression of myopia. There's still room for more investigations, definitely for multi-center trials and trials around the world.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I would be very curious to know more about this once we have more data. And I guess for the listeners, anyways, spending time outdoors is good for our circadian rhythms. So there are also other benefits that make it really worth it. And then maybe there's also an effect on myopia progression, but we don't know yet.
That is correct. I mean, we also have to mention the disclaimers that, hey, don't go outdoors and stare at the sun, please. So
Definitely.
we always have to protect ourselves. Make sure you put on sunscreen. If you're in a country that is very hot, humid, make sure to wear a cap. stay hydrated, make sure to wear UV blocking sunglasses. You have to protect your eyes. There are some studies that we published that show that even if you wear sunglasses, even the kid wears sunglasses, they still get a good dose of light outdoors. But today, however, we still don't know what's the minimum illuminance, what's the minimum level of light required to protect against myopia. But to err on the safe side, protect yourself outdoors, drink, hydrate, wear a cap, put some sunscreen when you go outdoors. Yeah.
Okay, super. I think this is a nice kind of package of little tips and suggestions that we can all use and also that parents can use. And I think this is a great note to end our chat. So yeah, thanks so much, Ray, for joining us on the podcast and sharing your insights on light exposure and myopia and telling us about your ongoing study in Singapore.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to find out more about the effect of light exposure on myopia and the ongoing studies in Singapore, feel free to check out our show notes. Also, today we have a little after show with some more recordings that Rashaya took with the kids because they were just so funny and so good that I thought I would share with you all.
And so imagine one day you wake up and you can decide to do whatever you want to do for that day. You can choose anything. What would you like to do?
Most likely, like other children, I would love to play with my iPad.
You'd like to play with your iPad?
Yeah.
Okay, the whole day?
Yes.
Only that?
And most probably eat ice cream or eat junk food.
Eat junk food. So you want to eat junk food and play with your iPad?
Yeah.
That's good to know.
I would just want to play with my tab the entire day.
The entire day?
Yeah.
Your tablet?
Yes.
Right. Just the whole day play
Yeah.
with your tablet?
Yes.
Other than that?
Go outside and play some more.
You would?
Yeah.
So you would still take some
Yeah.
time to go outside?
Yeah.
In between playing with your tablet?
Yeah.
Right.
You have been listening to Light O'Clock. This podcast is produced by me, Caro Guidolin. The podcast team includes many of my amazingly supportive colleagues and lab members. Manuel Spitzchen does the scientific fact-checking, and music, mix, and sound design are done by Ingo Bednarek. Show notes and additional resources are created by Maidel Fernandez Alonso and myself. Our social media team includes Lucien Bickerstaff, Nilufar Tabande, and Zara Alkaf. And Anna Magdalena Billa is our test listener. Light O'Clock is a podcast produced by the Translational Sensory and Circadian Neuroscience Unit, and we are supported by the Circadian Mental Health Network, the Viscom Prize from the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Psychologie and the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Psychophysiologie und ihre Anwendung, the Max Planck Society and the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics, and the Technical University of Munich.